Good morning. Welcome to The Human Author. My name is Jen Cantwell. Today I'm going to be reading chapters 19 and 20, work in progress called The Warning. You can learn more about the series at my author website at jbcantwell.com. If you have any questions about what I'm doing, feel free to get in touch at jen@thehumanauthor.com. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and read my work from this week. Chapter 19. We walked for 2 nights, and I was surprised when we came across nobody. No people, no animals, no trackers, no fiends, no keepers, only us. The silence around us was eerie, and I found myself looking over my shoulder frequently. Were they hiding out, waiting for us? Were these hills filled with servants of Zaan's? They might have been, but I hesitated to draw them out. It wasn't my desire to fight, not yet. Still, I moved over the land with caution, trying to ensure the safety of us all. Finally, as we came to the end of the desert, I could see the grove of oak trees in the distance, the castle just barely visible through the haze of the morning. I turned to the others. "Do you think we should push on with the sun up?" I asked. I knew the answer, the right answer, but those destroyed trunks in the distance were calling to me. Was there anything the sleeping tree could do for us, or had that refuge vanished forever? It was then that I realized what I was looking at: men. Immediately I dropped to the ground, hissing at the others to do so. They took my command seriously, and a moment later we were all hidden in the scrub grass. "What is it?" Kenneth asked. "Do you have a looking glass?" I asked quietly. He shook his head. "Why would I? I'm not going on a ship now, am I?" It was then that Brennan surprised us. He flipped his bag around and withdrew a small scope. He handed it over to me. "Where did you get this?" I asked, flipping it over in my hands, studying it. "The lifters from before," he said. "We spent our whole lives with them. We got used to stealing. We happened upon a group that had been killed during our last journey. I found this." "Brennan," I said quietly, "this is unbelievable." I put the glass to my eye and held the little contraption up, trying to focus on the grove up ahead. And yes, there they were, 6 lawmen stationed around the charred remains of the trees. I had a feeling I knew whom they were looking for. "Should we go back to the caves?" Kenneth asked. "Maybe we should spend a little time planning before we make the next move. If we get up now in broad daylight, they will surely see us. It is more dangerous for us to flee than stay right here and wait." "Wait for what?" he asked. "I don't know," I said. "Darkness?" Kenneth sighed. "Maybe we should let them take us," Brennan said. "I don't see how them chasing us is going to change anything, whether it's night or day. If we go with them, they'll probably take us to the dungeons where Regan and your father and grandmother are. Isn't that what we want?" I looked at him intently for a few moments, trying to decide what the right course of action would be. "Will your parents turn you in if they find you?" I asked Kenneth. "Are you considered a traitor at this point?" He shrugged. "I don't really care what they. It's not what you care about. It's what is safe. Would they be willing to hide us?" "Oh, no," he said. "In that case, I'm definitely considered a traitor." I said. I was thinking hard, trying to come up with an idea. Up until this point, the goal had been to find him, but I'd given little thought to what I would do when I got there, or rather, how I might do it. My priorities were shifting from traveling quietly and invisibly to finding our way back inside Eagleview. I found myself wondering again about Adair. Was he still there? If so, I felt certain he would hide us. It was perhaps our best bet. I looked up again at the sleeping tree, dead to the world in the distance. A longing I didn't expect settled into my chest, and it was difficult for me to stay on the ground and not make my way to the tree that had proven to be a good friend my entire life. What they did to it was terrible. But then Zaan was terrible too. I picked up the scope again and shifted it so I was looking at the castle far in the distance. It was impossible to tell from here how heavily guarded it might be, but I had to assume that it was. I had been thinking that entry to the city in the middle of the night would be sufficient. For whatever reason, having the reality of the soldiers who defended it, I had conveniently left that part of the argument out of my decision-making process. Now I couldn't run away from it. I was staring it right in the face. I looked back behind us, seeing that the caves were far enough behind that it would take at least a couple of hours to make it somewhere we would be protected. I think I've got it, I said. What have you got? Kenneth asked. A plan? Maybe, but it means we will have to stay down here beneath the bushes for the day. All those men right there. I don't think it would be safe to travel during the daylight. I held the scope up to my eye again and searched the surrounding desert. I could see no one closer to us that we needed to be aware of. The desert was, quite simply, empty. Had we killed all of those lifters so many months back? I doubted it. We'll burn something fierce under this sun, Brennan said. Can't we find somewhere to... No, Kenneth said, looking around. They're sure to have weapons as well as spyglasses. Won't they be waiting for us in the dark, too? Yes, certainly, Kenneth said, but maybe we'll have a chance to slink by. That's my hope, I said. We will make for the picking fields. I have a friend there, Adair. I'm sure he'll help us. I sincerely doubt any adults would. They've got too much to lose. But when faced with someone who already has nothing, I think he will be the most willing to help. I was leaving an important fact out, and that was that Adair was I was guessing he was maybe 9 or 10. It was hard to tell, and I felt certain he was stunted from all those years without enough food. I wondered what a serving or two of light might do for him. Would it make him grow tall? Would it fill his belly like it filled mine? I was willing to bet he'd never had an opportunity to touch stuff like light. Then again, I was also willing to bet he was a sneaky little thief, so maybe I was wrong. Let's cover ourselves with our cloaks. Take a drink of water. Wait, those men out there don't have horses, so it would be our running legs against theirs, and they're covered in armor, something that will trip them up. We'll keep an eye on them as the day goes by. My belly was full of nerves as I watched the men walk back and forth near what remained of the trees. Had they seen us before we'd hit the ground? It was my turn for a rest, but I found myself wide awake. The spyglass was stuck to my hand like glue, and I scanned the horizon obsessively, searching for any threat. He looked over at me, then held out his hand. Give it to me, he said. I can take a turn. You're the one who didn't sleep. I reluctantly handed it over, wishing we had more than one. We needed to keep our gaze upon any lawman looking out for Eagleview Kingdom. But Kenneth was right. I was exhausted despite the flash of fear that had jolted my body upon seeing the men. I lay my head down, using a bit of my cloak to keep my face out of the sandy dirt. Soon my eyes were closing, the real world mixing with my dream state. I was running, doing exactly what Oriana had told me to do so many months ago. They were after me, her family, and I needed to get away fast. Suddenly, the city evaporated around me, and I found myself in a field of tall green grass. I paused, looking around, but the only thing I could see was grass far in the distance. No mountains, no forests, just grasslands. I took up the run again. Not sure where I was headed or why I was running, only understanding that I needed to move. Rain began to fall, but then I realized tears were falling as well. Their hot, salty liquid mixed with the icy raindrops on my cheeks, and I found I was no longer sure what was rain and what was tears. So many opportunities, so many times I'd fled. Maybe this meant that was a faulty approach. Shouldn't I be forced to face my enemy while standing side by side with my friends? Not if you want them all to live. Right, because that was the truth, wasn't it? If I could lead Torin away, maybe I could do it right now. My friends would have a chance at survival. No, you can't run. Not yet. I let out a deep breath and stopped running again, searching around me on all sides, but the grass was as empty as it had been moments before. Suddenly, I felt that running was the wrong thing to do. My boots were sticking in the mud, and as I looked down, I decided to do the opposite of what my body wanted me to do. Sat. After a while of the rain pelting me, I finally got so tired I could wait no longer. I lay down right there in the grass, using a wet fistful of blades as my pillow. So much guessing, so much pressure to choose the right thing to do next. My brain chewed on this idea, and I took heart in the fact that I was completely alone with my thoughts. Every once in a while, I would peek my head up above the blades of grass, searching for threat, but no threat came, only disjointed thoughts. So, even though I didn't see any of my enemies on the horizon, I still wished for answers, answers that only a few people in the world might be able to give to me. I closed my eyes, and the raindrops falling on my cheeks stung. What had happened? Suddenly, somebody grabbing me on the shoulder and shaking me awake. When I first opened my eyes, I didn't know where I was, but the stinging on my cheeks was real. I'd apparently been sunburned during my summer. I rolled over, pulling the cloak over my head to protect it from the sun. What happened? I asked. I was gone, and I swore that. Nothing happened, Kenneth said. We've been here all day. They haven't moved. Ah, he was talking about the lawmen. I understood that now. So no one has come to relieve them of duty? I don't think so, Kenneth said. He held up the scope again, scanning the horizon for threats. I haven't seen anyone else all day, just those 6 men. I don't think we should go that way. I know it means a lot to you, but give me the scope. I want to have a look. I reached out my hand. Kenneth looked down at it, surprisingly protective of the little tool. I shook my hand in the air, and he finally passed it to me. I put it up to my eye. He was right. There were still 6 men, but they had barely moved. I wondered when they might get a break. Surely, standing in the hot sun, covered in armor all day, was dangerous. I didn't care much about the lawmen. But then I saw something that made me do a double take. One man in particular was leaning up against what remained of the sleeping tree. If what I was seeing was right, he'd been in that same position all day. Was it possible? Suddenly, a terrible idea popped into my head. What if they weren't real at all? What if their intentions were only meant to scare us? I turned to Kenneth. Have you seen them move today? He frowned at me, looking confused. Have they been in the same configuration all afternoon? Kenneth thought about it for a moment, and just when he was about to speak, he closed his mouth again. He took the glass from my hand and held it up to his eye. Then I watched as his eyes grew wide with recognition. I had hit home. They haven't, have they? I said. He looked away from the glass, staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. I don't know. I haven't been consistently watching them. Brennan has been keeping an eye out in case any began to come our way. He looked over at Brennan. Well, he asked. Brennan shrugged. I guess not. I was only looking for them when we thought they were coming for us. Now they look still. He looked up at me. What do you think we should do? I didn't require asking twice. I stood up, suddenly willing to allow myself to be seen. I felt a tugging, and I looked down to find Kenneth hissing at me. They'll see you, he said. Get back down here. But I felt I knew it now. If anything, I had an unpleasant feeling in my chest, a tension where before had been none. I wasn't sure if these were Zahn's or Torin's men, but I had a terrible feeling that we were about to find out about the fate of those who crossed them. I pushed Kenneth's hands away and took a couple of steps forward. We're safe, I said. I picked up my pack and strapped it around my shoulders, then turned to the others. They're fake. He knew I would want to come here. Maybe Erin told him before she left. That woman was as slippery as a snake, and I only wished I'd had more time to burrow into her mind and find out what her purpose truly was and what plans she'd had. But it was too late now. Even if I could find her again, the way was long and the forest thick. It would be a challenge even if I were able to be transported there. One thing was certain, though. The time to act had arrived. Get your things, I said decisively. We're heading in. Chapter 20. There was much grumbling on the part of Kenneth, but he took my order seriously and gathered his things and Brennan's. I hope you know what you're doing, he said. I looked over at him and found him glaring at me. You don't have to come, I said, but it's important that I go. What is so important that you're suddenly willing to allow yourself to be trapped by 6 lawmen who work for Zahn? Sounds pretty crazy to me. I smirked. People didn't always call me crazy, but there was something about that word that I liked. I wasn't your average girl. I can fight them off, I said, trying to be reassuring. He scoffed, but then Brennan got involved. She can, he said. I've seen her in battle. She saved us. I say we do what she wants, at least for now. I don't think she would lead us straight into the dragon's throat, right? He looked up at me. I didn't want to lie, but a big part of me didn't want to scare him either. I settled for something in the middle. It will be dangerous. If I had my way, I'd leave you two here, but you're both probably right. We should stick together. This is going to be a slaughter, Kenneth said. I knew he could be right, but I had little choice. It was either go and find out the truth or go far around them and find our way into Eagleview from the other side of the city. I wondered how much silver was on my head now. I don't see it that way, I said. I think we can learn a lot from those men. One way or another, we're going to be bringing the city soon. If they have orders to capture us, and I'm sure they do, at least we know we'll be headed to the right place. I turned and began walking away, hearing the others shuffling about, trying to get their things ready to go. I didn't slow down, though. I wanted to see what was going on up ahead, and I trusted that the two of them would catch up. I paused after a few minutes, hearing them huffing behind me as they caught up. I put the scope to my eye, and, just as I'd thought, the men hadn't moved an inch. I turned to Kenneth and held out the scope. Take a look at this. He took it from me, held it up to his eye, and frowned. I don't understand. Why are they in the same position? Let me have it, Brennan said, reaching up to take it from Kenneth. Kenneth hesitated. I'm the one who gave it to you, if you remember, Brennan said. Finally, Kenneth relented and passed him the glass. See, Brennan said. Bree is right. I bet they're fake, like scarecrows. He swept over the rest of the land, but his face stayed calm. I followed his line of sight, and I didn't see anything either. Finally, he took the glass away from his eye and handed it back to me. There's nothing there, just lawmen, and they're so weird. Maybe they're sleeping. Standing up? I asked. Brennan shrugged. It's just an idea. I kept the scope in my hand as we moved forward again. The grove of oak trees were maybe an hour away, but the sun was still high in the sky, and I could feel the sweat coming through my tunic and drenching my traveling pack. Every couple of minutes, I would hold the scope up, sweeping the horizon as Brennan had done, but as before, nothing had changed. We were too far away to determine whom it was exactly who was waiting for us in the trees. But the closer we got, the more nervous I became. Not because I was anticipating being caught, but more because I didn't know what to expect. Finally, when we were 10 minutes away, we dropped down in the grass again, and each of us looked through the glass. What we saw now was unlike anything I'd ever seen before, for it was not lazy soldiers, men sleeping, or scarecrows, as Brennan had suggested. Instead, what we saw was nothing but carnage. I looked at the others, handing the glass back to Kenneth. I can't believe what I'm seeing, I said, and I meant, who would do that? I stood up, no longer feeling the need to hide. Kenneth grabbed onto my foot, but I wrenched my boot out of his grasp. I walked toward the men, then found myself breaking into a run, suddenly eager to help. Maybe it was a trap, or maybe it was just a warning to stay away. But why? I closed the space between our last hiding spot and the grove of trees in the space of minutes. But when I got close enough to see with my own eyes what I'd been looking at through the glass, it was all I could do to not be sick. 6 men, lawmen, were destroyed in a variety of ways. One sat up against a tree stump, sliced from head to toe. Another hung from a low branch that had survived the onslaught months before. Another was strung up high, his neck broken, eyes wide. I turned to the others, unsure of what to do. Kenneth came running, grabbing me by the hand and taking Brennan's as well. It's danger, he said. We never should have come. They'll be after us at any moment. I wrenched my arm away, taking a few steps closer. Look through the glass, I said to him. Check no one is coming. I walked among the carcasses, both trees and men. Most had their eyes closed, but 2 of them had eyes wide. I bent over in front of one of these, touching him on the shoulder. I wondered if I was too late. I closed my eyes and pushed healing magic into him. But I felt nothing in return. Then a quick groan came from off to one side. I craned my neck around, looking for the maker of the sound, and I found that one of the men who had his eyes closed was the culprit. I walked up beneath where he had been tacked to a tree trunk. Large metal stakes were driven into his shoulders and deep into the wood, trapping him there. What happened here? I asked, grappling for his hand. Oh no, don't touch, he whispered hoarsely. I am lost. I put 2 hands on his chest and pulsed magic at him, but his groans turned into screams, and I backed away. My hands shook, outstretched in front of me as I waited for an opportunity to help, not hurt. Tears ran down the man's face, and I wondered what had happened to bring this team so close to death. No, this wasn't just death. It was torture. Tell me, I said quietly. Tell me who did this, and I'll kill them myself. The man glanced up at me, careful not to move his head and bring himself any more pain. It was him, he said. Who? Zahn? The man shook his head, then stopped, hissing in pain. It was the other one, the new one. He called himself something I don't remember. My stomach suddenly felt full of sharp rocks. He took over from Zahn, killed many, tortured more. But why bring you out here? I breathed. I don't know, he said. The man said we were waiting for a girl. They've been out here for weeks, and no girl had come by. The man's head began to loll back and forth, and for a moment it looked as if he was about to lose consciousness. Don't leave me now, I said, waving a hand in front of his face. I know you're in a lot of pain. If you'll let me touch you, I can. No, the man said. Please don't touch me. Please, just kill me. How I wished for a vial or 3 of light in that moment. I can't kill you, I said. You have to tell me what happened. You said you were looking for a girl. Who is she? I don't know, he cried. She was someone with magic, I think. The only thing I remember is that we weren't allowed to kill her ourselves. First, we had horses, but they took them away after the first week. Then they just left us out here. No food, no water, just us. One night, in the middle of the night, he came for us. He told us how disappointed he was that we hadn't been able to find her. And then he did this to us. It seemed almost fun to him, like practice for some event. Most of the others died instantly, but before he left, he approached me and told me to send a message to anyone who passed by. I leaned in closer, trying to catch every whisper. And what was that message? I asked. For the first time, he raised his eyes and looked me right in the face. I will not tell, he said quietly. After what that man did to all of us, what he's been doing to the people in the city, I will not be made to pass his messages as a carrier pigeon. He has no desire to save us, nor any reason to. Please, sir, I said, taking a couple of steps closer. Let me help you so you can think more clearly. No, put your hands down, please. It was then that I had a different idea. I knew very well how to possess another, but I wasn't sure about reading minds. Did he still have the memories fresh in his consciousness for me to observe? I took another step back and closed my eyes, reaching out with my mind towards him, toward his. Gaining entry into someone's head who was so terribly, brutally injured was unexpectedly jarring. Part of me felt the pain in my own body, and I understood why he didn't want to tell me the truth. Would I have wanted to? Would I have been so stubborn to refuse in order to hurt my enemy? Sir, I promise not to touch you again. Do you believe? Please, please tell me what he said. The man you speak of is named Torin. He's an evil overlord, and it's my job to bring an end to his terrifying reign. Tell me what you can. You don't even need to open your mouth. But his mind was blank, completely obliterated by the intense pain riddling his body. I could feel acutely that he wanted me to go, could feel his desperation to be eased into death. I might have tried to possess him, to force him to do what? What would I have such a man do on my behalf? Perhaps if he were not pinned to the broken tree behind him, he could help me. After everything he'd been through, I imagined he probably would be willing to do so. Forget his orders. Sir, just relax and let me see what he said to you, what you were supposed to tell me. And he did relax. First his feet, then his knees. I could feel a wave of relaxation coming across his body, as if it were my own. It was a lovely sort of feeling, quite similar to relief, only sweeter. It was only after I started to feel his mind slipping away that I realized what I'd been experiencing, what he'd been experiencing. For this was no magical elixir, no curse, no spell. It was simply death washing over him as a wave of warm water might. Wait! Before you go, tell me what he said, for I am that girl. Don't leave me alone to fight against him. Only speak, you could help. His message was clear and simple, he croaked out. Run. But suddenly, I wasn't willing to do that. The time wasn't right, and as I watched this desperate man finally slip into death, I realized that the message Torin had left for me was false. It was as confusing a thought. It was a confusing thought, especially considering that I myself had been seriously contemplating making my escape and drawing Torin's army away from Eagleview. If I were to do that now, would I be playing into his hands? Or would that be the opposite? What if I were to stay and fight? There was no way to know the truth about what Torin wanted. My only way forward was to trust myself and use the information I had. I turned around, ready to leave the grove, when I found both Kenneth and Brennan standing at the far end of the trees, staring at one in particular, sleeping tree. There was almost nothing left of it, just what remained of a charred trunk. Was this the one? Kenneth asked. Was this the one that hid you? It looks different than the others. I ran my hand over what bark remained, wishing that the tree would come to life at my touch once more. It had saved me so many times, and now it was gone forever. But was it? I leaned over the stump and looked at it more closely. There in the middle was a tiny green leaf. I knelt down, and though I desired greatly to touch it, I didn't dare disturb it. Finally, I answered Kenneth. This tree has saved my life many times, I said. I watched as Zahn's students destroyed it, and it was like losing a dear old friend. I looked down at the ground I was kneeling upon and found it to be nearly as blackened as what remained of the tree. How did it work? Brennan asked. Oh, it was like a big wooden surprise. It would lower its branches so I could crawl inside, and then it would hide me high up in the canopy. No one has ever been able to find me while I've been in the embrace of this tree. And look here, I pointed to the tiny green plant coming out of the stump. Here's hoping it regrows. Maybe in a few years we will be able to return to it once again. All of us fell silent for a time, watching the tree as if it would regrow at any second. But looking around, none of us could deny that we stood in the slaughter. This was no place for us, not anymore. I think we should head out once the sun sets, Kenneth said. You mentioned the picking fields, that you have a friend there? I nodded, but I didn't take my eyes off the tree. Adair, I said. He's just a little kid, but he's smart, and I bet he knows where we can hide. Good, Kenneth said. And what do we do once we're inside? Inside, on the other side of the wall that surrounded the city, I had a plan, faulty as it was. First, we find my father, I said. He will know what to do, where we can go, and how to fight Zahn. Hopefully, grandmother and Regan are both with him. While I suspected the three of them to still be together, it occurred to me that they were probably in the dungeons. Was that what would happen to me and my friends if we were to be caught? Or was there a way for me to go at this and protect them at the same time? I pushed over and sat down with my back up against the tree, remembering the time it had hidden both me and Connell. That was back before all of this conflict had begun, back before I'd even known the name Torin. Things had been so much easier then. But had they? Let me have the scope, Brennan said. You can rest, but one of us should be on the lookout. Suddenly, I realized he was right. I was in no condition to protect us. Not right in that moment. As I handed the scope to him, I felt a tightening in my chest, and suddenly it was hard to breathe. Tears ran down my face. Brennan didn't catch it, but Kenneth did. He sat down beside me and took one of my hands in his. It's a different world now, he said quietly. But we're going to find our way out of this, I swear. I looked up at him. But how do you know? He shrugged, and I could feel his fingers slowly caressing mine. Think of it this way. If you were to make it out of Eagleview in one piece, and with all those sorcerers against you the day you left, then you can do pretty much anything, you know? Yep, Brennan said from behind me. You helped us get away from those lifters, too. Not anyone could have done that. Kenneth nodded. See? Even a little kid knows how powerful you are. Brennan smirked, and Kenneth reached out with his foot and gave him a little kick. But seriously, if any of us can get us back into the castle, it's you. And if any of us can help defeat Zahn, it's me, I said miserably. It's you. It was funny, but for all those years I'd been waiting to get away from Eagleview, now I wanted nothing more than to break my way back inside. Kenneth squeezed my hand and drew it to his lips, kissing it gently. I felt a rush of blood go through my body as he did this, but it wasn't powerful enough to take the pain away, not completely. How odd it felt to be wanted, a lifetime of being kicked around. Part of me was tempted to take my hand back, but it was so comfortable in his that I didn't. I think we should go now, Brennan said, seemingly oblivious to what was going on with his friends. There's no one out there. We might as well. I glanced over at Kenneth, and he gently put my hand back onto my knee. Then he stood up and offered to pull me up. But it was an offer I didn't take. Instead, I put both of my hands into the dirt and climbed to my feet on my own. As much as I wanted the help of others to fight for our home, I was suddenly unwilling to allow these two to go first. No, I would be on the front line, and I would put the people I cared about most in the back. I brushed the dirt off my pants and faced them, my hand still warm from where Kenneth had held it. "Can I see the scope?" I asked. Brennan held it out for me, and I put it to my eye, scanning the horizon. But he'd been right. There was nobody there. This made me nervous. Lawmen I could deal with, but secrecy and tricks were something different. Still, there was nothing for it. We couldn't stay there forever. I handed it back to him. Then, without another word, I picked up my bag and began this last leg of the journey home, out front, in charge, and filled with anger. We would make it out alive. It was a promise I made silently to myself, to my friends, and to that terrible man who awaited us. Okay, so that's it for this week. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. I'll be back here next Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific to read chapters 21 and 22. Thanks for joining, and hopefully I'll see you next week. Bye.